History of Freemasonry, we've acquired some really amazing artifacts and literary resources that deserve to be preserved, archived, and studied. We're going to be talking about all that and more with some of the experts at the Scottish Rite Masonic Museum and Library in the Northern Masonic Jurisdiction. So stick with us. We have an excellent show for you lined up right after this on Historical Light.
Welcome back to the Historical Light Masonic Podcast, dedicated to illuminating our past and bringing our Masonic history to light since 2016. And now, enjoy the show.
Good evening and welcome back to another episode of Historical Light. I'm your host, Brother Alex Powers. This is a Masonic show focused on the historical events and aspects within Freemasonry. We have some amazing guests this evening from the Scottish Rite Masonic Museum and Library in the Northern Masonic Jurisdiction. We have Jeff, Rich, and Hilary, and I'm going to hand it over to you guys for some more proper introductions of yourself. Just in order on my screen, Jeff, will you mind going first?
Sure, not at all. Thanks very much, Alex. My name is Jeff Croteau, and I am the Director of Library and Archives at the Scottish Rite Masonic Museum and Library in Lexington, Massachusetts, where I have been since 2007.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for being with us. Hilary, how about you?
I also work at the Scottish Rite Masonic Museum and Library, and I've been there for a little bit over 20 years.
Fantastic. Good evening, Rich. How are you doing?
I am doing great, Alex. First of all, I want to thank you for this very gracious opportunity to participate in this program tonight. We certainly appreciate that. So my name is Rich Elliot, and I'm the Executive Director of the Scottish Rite Masonic Museum and Library in Lexington, Massachusetts. I had the opportunity to step into this role at the beginning of 2021, officially retired from a previous career, and very, very grateful that I have the opportunity to work for this very, very talented staff.
Fantastic. We are thrilled to have you guys here this evening. Historical Light is totally focused around the history of Freemasonry, and we really push about archival, digitizing. So the work that you guys do is right down our alley, and I can't wait to hear all about the history of your operation, what you guys have going on today. We typically start this off with a little bit of icebreakers, though, just to get to know our guests on a personal level. Let's start off with Hilary. Do you have any connection with Freemasonry outside of this being your job?
No, not really.
Okay.
I came to the museum because I had experience working with historical objects and artifacts and a background in material culture and a lot of experience working on exhibitions. And I've been at the museum for a while now, and I've had a chance to learn a lot about Freemasonry, but I don't have any familial connections to the organization.
Fantastic. How about you, Jeff? Do you got any family history or anything in Freemasonry before this?
Similar to Hilary, I actually have no Masons in my family as far as I know. And as with Hilary, I ended up at the museum professionally. I was in museum libraries before I came to the Scottish Rite Masonic Museum and Library. And so I came there as someone who had worked in libraries and museums previously, and I've learned an awful lot about Freemasonry and fraternalism in the time that I've been there.
Whether you wanted to or not, right?
Whether I wanted to or not. That's right.
That's fantastic. How about you, Rich?
So I do have some history in my family. My grandfather was a Mason, past master of the lodge here in Hampton, New Hampshire. My dad is a Mason, 94 years old, continues to be very committed and dedicated to our Scottish Rite and his Blue Lodge. And I also have an uncle that was a Mason and a past master of the lodge here in Hampton. So I joined Masonry in 1978, became master of my lodge here in Hampton, New Hampshire in 1985, and served that lodge for a year. I've been very involved in both Blue Lodge Masonry and most particularly Scottish Rite Masonry, although I do belong to several other appendant organizations in Masonry. My commitment has been to Scottish Rite. I've served Scottish Rite our Scottish Rite here in the Northern Jurisdiction in several capacities over the years, and on several committees. And as the conversation continues here tonight, we may find out a little bit more about some of those things.
Fantastic. That's really cool. So we've got this perspective of both inside masonry and outside masonry on that professional level. That's really awesome. And I'm excited to hear how that adds into the operation that you have going on today. So before we get into the meat and potatoes of this episode this evening, which I cannot wait to dive into, I do want to give a huge shout out to our supporters over on Patreon. Been around since 2016, and those of you that help support us and keep growing really are who keep the lights on and let us really do better and more entertaining content every episode and bring you more Masonic history. So if you guys like what you see, you can always go to the website historicalite.com, click on support, and through the various support levels, you can get some really cool perks through the Patreon. So with that, guys, let's dive in. I really want to know, kind of first and foremost, what's the history behind the Scottish Rite Masonic Museum and Library? When did it get started?
So I'll kick the conversation off, and then I'll let Hilary and Jeff add in. So the museum and library was an idea, a concept of George Newbery, and the person that really affected the entire project was Stanley Maxwell. They're both past sovereign grand commanders of our Northern Masonic Jurisdiction. Our headquarters for our Scottish Rite was located in 1964 in the Statler building in Boston. And at that time, they formed a committee. George Newbery formed a committee and decided that they would look for some property outside of Boston to relocate the Northern Masonic Jurisdiction Supreme Council. So Stanley Maxwell was the one that actually located and found the property. He was instrumental in purchasing the property and then developing the property, the buildings on the property down the road. So we moved our Supreme Council headquarters out to an existing building in Lexington in 1968, I believe it was. And then we shortly after that worked with the town of Lexington to put all the proper permits in place to begin construction on a museum and library. It was to be a building that was to be a bicentennial gift given in 1975 to the American people, essentially by 32nd degree Scottish Rite Masons. Was dedicated in 1975 by Sovereign Grand Commander George Newbery at the end of his term, and was Stanley Maxwell that really brought the institution to light shortly thereafter. So the building, built in 1975, 74 and 75, and dedicated in 75, is now coming up on its 50th anniversary. So we're looking to kind of do some special celebrations at that point in time in 2025. And uniquely, at the very same time, is the 250th anniversary for the beginning of the American Revolution, right where we are in Lexington, Massachusetts. So that's a little bit about the building. Hilary and Jeff can add a little bit more if they'd like, but that's the very basis of how we came to Lexington.
Fantastic. Hilary, Jeff, what else you guys got?
So from the library side, as Rich was saying, the museum opened in 1975, and the actual collection of the museum's library had started before the actual Scottish Rite Masonic Museum and Library opened, because the Supreme Council itself, the governing body of the Scottish Rite, had been building their own library, and this had been going on since the 19th century and into the early 20th century. And in the 1930s, they really started to organize their library, and this continued on until the 1970s, when the museum was open and a collection of material came from the Supreme Council into the new museum and library building. And so we continue to add to the collection today. So over the past almost 50 years, we've been continuing to add material to the collection, both by gift and by purchase. But we actually began life by having a collection of material already when the museum opened, and we're open to the public today, I can get more into who we serve and what we do as we go along in the conversation. But from the history point of view, we were lucky to have a collection that already existed when the museum opened.
Fantastic. Hilary, anything from you?
Yeah, on the museum side, it's a different story. So
Sure.
in terms of three-dimensional objects, fine art, regalia, jewels, things like that we collect actively today, and we have in our collection now about 25,000 things.
Wow.
In the beginning, Jeff and I were debating this. Could we say there's no collection, or was there just a small collection? The fact of the matter is, the museum started, and its object collection was basically, it seems to have been gifts that have been given to different sovereign grand commanders. So it was a very small group of things. And then right after the museum opened, they started making purchases. They received all kinds of donations from members of the public. And over time, we've been a little more systematic about it. But it started from the object side, not with very little. So we've really shaped that in the last almost 50 years.
That's fantastic. That's really interesting with the Sovereign Grand Commander kind of gifts, where it started from, and then seeing where it grows into today. So I'm curious, as we move along here, on the museum and the library side, what are some of the more impressive items that you guys have within the collections that kind of blow you guys away?
Well, on the library and archive side, I would say that I can give you a few examples. One is an object that a lot of people who are interested in the Scottish Rite have probably heard about, which is the Franken manuscript. And
Yes.
this is the 1783 Franken manuscript. What this is a manuscript, handwritten book of rituals that was written out in 1783 in Kingston, Jamaica, by a man named Henry Andrew Franken. And the reason why so many people are interested in it is because these are the earliest existing English language versions of rituals which became Scottish Rite rituals. So these rituals predate the founding of the Scottish Rite in 1801. But when the Scottish Rite was formed in 1801, some of the rituals that were brought into the degree system of the Scottish Rite came from this, sometimes called the Order of the Royal Secret, sometimes called the Rite of Perfection, which were the rituals within the Franken manuscript, which is a degree system of degrees 4 through 25. So for anyone who's interested in the history of ritual, especially Scottish Rite ritual, it's sort of the text that people are interested in. And it was published in a facsimile form a few years ago by the Supreme Council. So it's very accessible outside of our museum and library. But when people come and visit and we want to show them some of the highlights of the collection, the Franken manuscript is always a wonderful thing that we can bring out to them. And another example I would just give right now is we have some wonderful Masonic documents from the 18th century, from the 1700s. And one of the ones that I particularly love, and I love to show people when I have the opportunity to do a little show and tell of treasures from our collection, is a lodge summons from 1768. And this is a lodge summons that was printed, engraved, and sold by Paul Revere. The famous Paul Revere of the American Revolutionary period, who was also a Mason. He was a Mason in the Lodge of St. Andrew in Boston, and he eventually became Grand Master of the Grand Lodge of Massachusetts in the 1790s. And what's so special about this Masonic summons is not only was it printed by Paul Revere, but during the same year that this particular copy of the summons that we have was issued, he was also secretary of the lodge. And so the document's also signed by Paul Revere in his capacity as secretary of the lodge. So it's sort of a great object in terms of one thing about historical objects, I think, is that you get a sense of, wow, this person that I've heard about in history was involved in the making of this document. And I think that's one of those where, you can sort of look at it in a couple of ways in terms of how Paul Revere was involved in the making of this document. And it sort of I think it's an accessible way to connect to Masonic history. So those are just a couple of many examples that I could give of some of the wonderful things in the library and archive side of the collection.
That's fantastic. Hilary, how about you? How about something that's you found in the library or archives that's kind of nerded you out a little bit?
Let's see. I'm a soft touch, so I come across great things every day, which is wonderful. We have all different kinds of objects in the museum collection. We have a wonderful collection of Masonic quilts, and those are terrific because we often know who the makers were, and when we do interpretation of those objects, we can understand more about how Freemasonry was a family organization and how that looked in different parts of the country. We also have a fabulous collection of different kinds of engraved jewels. And often because those have a name on them or the name of a lodge, you can really connect to a personal story. We have some wonderful photographs, and those often are another avenue to explore how Freemasonry spread across the country. We just last year we were doing some work on a photograph, and you just never know what you're going to uncover. And it turned out the sitter was a pioneer in the California wine industry. And it was a case of who knew. And so we have a lot of those kinds of things. And it's always, the more research we do, the more we can put these objects into context and hopefully tell an engaging story with our exhibitions and publications.
That's fantastic. Rich, how about you? With your background in Freemasonry, what do you see while you go to work that's like, wow?
There are so many special things in the collection, in both the archives and the collection side of what we do. What makes this special for me, Alex, is when we have individuals or groups come in, and I take a step back and watch the staff share these items with individuals and groups, and the passion that Hilary and Jeff and the rest of the staff have when they're able to share these items. It's in my mind, it's just so exciting to watch. And when people are able to stand beside some of these items, these documents and these pieces from the collection, and hear the stories that are the history behind these items, it makes it very, very special. And as we work each and every day, these are the things that we want to do in a better fashion for the future of our fraternity and for our museum and library, is find ways that we can get all of these things in front of more people so they can get excited about them the same way Hilary and Jeff do every time they talk and show. So they kind of show and tell for them. And I get excited watching them and sharing in their passion when they have those opportunities to share those stories.
That's fantastic. Well, I want to kind of get to know a little bit more about the operation of the Scottish Rite Museum and Library there, and really understand what you guys have going on and kind of the plans for the future. And then hopefully towards the end of the episode, maybe pick your guys' brains a little bit for those dealing with their own lodge collections and how they can maybe take some advice from you guys. So tell me about what's the operation you guys got going on right now? What's your plans, and what are your plans for the future?
Go ahead, Jeff.
Sure. So on the library and archive side, the main thing we do, right, is we make sure that we can provide access to this material, preserve this material so that down the road, many years down the road, this material will still be available. It'll be in good condition. People can still access it. So, day to day, a lot of what we do is we answer reference questions. So if people have questions, sometimes people get in touch because they have an object they want to learn more about, or sometimes they have an ancestor who was a Freemason and they want to learn how they can learn more about what this person did, what lodge they belong to, etc. Or they may be interested in something very specific from our collection. So we're always available to make sure we can answer reference questions in a timely manner, and usually try to help people out possible. So if someone sends us an email or gives us a call, if there's something we can do to scan a few pages from a book to send to them, we're happy to do that sort of thing. And then sometimes if people are doing in-depth research, they need to come on site, which is always fun because they come into our reading room, we pull material for them so they can look through these archival material or books on their own and do research in our reading room. And then, of course, we have to do the day-to-day work of acquiring new material, so purchasing new material, receiving donations from generous donors who are willing to donate material to us that we don't have, and then the less exciting work, but very important work of cataloging material so that people can actually find what we have. So, it's great to have a room full of books, but if you don't know what's in the room, then it's difficult to access the material. So one of the things, we're very fortunate. We have a lot of resources. So we have staff, we have funding. This is not something that every Masonic collection has. In fact,
Right.
It's unfortunately quite rare. So we're very fortunate that we have had for so many years continued funding and staffing to be able to do this kind of work, because it's a lot of work to just do simple things like process material so that it gets cataloged, it gets put on the shelf, so that way when someone comes into the library and says, I'm looking for this book, you can look it up in the catalog, you can find the call number, you can go to the shelf and find the book and pull it right down and give it to someone so they can sit down and look at it. It's, you can take it for granted when you're on the side of the person who walks up and asks the person in the library, can I look at this book? But there's a lot of work that sort of goes on behind the scenes to do that. So day to day, there's a lot of that. But then we do we have a couple of cases, exhibition cases in the reading room of our library. So we like to program those cases for about 6 months every year. For 6 months, we'll have a couple of cases. Right now, we have Scottish Rite reunion programs dating from about 1880 till the mid 20th century. So these sort of help tell a little bit of the story of Scottish Rite reunions over the past almost 100 years. And it's a great way to just be able to get some of the material that people may not be able to see on a day-to-day basis, because so many of collections are on shelves or in boxes, and put them out so that people can see them, and we can do a little bit of interpretation as to what this material is, why it's interesting, what you can learn from it. And then soon we'll be doing we'll be taking those materials out of the cases and putting in new acquisition material, because we also every 6 months or so, every year or so, we like to highlight new acquisitions that have come into the library and archives collection, and it's just a great way of sort of showing people what we're acquiring now and new stuff that we're building, because there's always new stuff that we're interested in adding to the collection, whether that new stuff is actually a new book about Freemasonry that someone published, or it's a very old book that we don't have in the collection yet that we like to add. So those are just a handful of the activities. We also have, I can talk more about this later, but we've digitized some material as well, and so there's been some material some work that we've done on the digital side in terms of providing access to digital collections from the library and archives. So that's a little bit of an overview of the kind of thing that goes on in the library and archives day to day.
That's fantastic. Sadly, you're bumming me out a little bit because I'm not close enough to come and be that nerd that bugs you guys every day, because that sounds amazing to sit in a reading room and have you guys bring all these manuscripts to me so I can nerd out there. So wondering, like, accessibility, who's able to come and utilize that, and like what's the cost involved for someone to come in and do research?
Sure. So I'm happy to say that there is no cost involved, and anyone who would like can come in.
Fantastic.
We're open to the public, and the museum, the library and archives reading room is located right off of Travis Hall, which is the sort of main lobby of the museum. So we're very easy to find when people come in the museum. And in fact, one of the bonuses of having a library that's in such a space that is very accessible is that we can have people that come into the reading room, and they don't necessarily know anything about the library and archives, and they come in and they ask what's going on, and I'm going to hand this over to Hilary for just a second.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, just like Jeff was saying, we deal with inquiries, sort of on an operations basis. We deal with inquiries. We are happy to help people with different kinds of questions about their own or family collections or their collections in their lodge or valley. But we also put a lot of time and effort into exhibitions. We have 2 galleries, and we also have some corridor exhibition area and some other display cases throughout the museum. And that is, I work in the collections department with an assistant curator, a collections manager, and a curatorial assistant. And we often work with outside designers and photographers and other people. And we put a lot of effort into creating exhibitions that hopefully offer a kind of sweep people up, tell a story, get people to learn something, but mostly what we would love people to feel when they go through our exhibitions are engaged, have their curiosity sparked. And right now our big exhibition is the Masonic Hall of Fame, Extraordinary Freemasons in American History. And that is something that people can come see and at the museum. And it could take, if you work at it, you could take an hour to go through there, or you could take 20 minutes. It depends on your style as a museum goer, but it reflects quite a bit of work. And so day to day, a lot of our work is preparing for those kinds of projects, in addition to dealing with inquiries about possible donations or history questions that come in, which we love because we always learn something new from those.
That's fantastic. It sounds like quite the facility you guys got there. And again, I'm going to have to make it back up there in person. I was sharing in the green room that I was lucky enough to get up for one of the Masonicon, well, actually several of the Masonicon events at Ezekiel Bates Lodge in Attleboro, and had the chance to go visit the Grand Lodge of Massachusetts, but I did not get a chance to go visit your guys' facility. So that is on the list to do. And I'm going to have to make it back over there because I'm really a fan of that part of the country, especially all the history you guys have in that area, which is quite amazing. So on the list, can't wait to get there and see it in person for sure.
So I'd like to share a little bit more about the facility if I could, Alex.
Yeah, go for it.
So in addition to the exhibitions and the museum and library, we also have at the facility a 390-seat auditorium. It's a state-of-the-art auditorium. We have a separate conference center, which will also seat a couple of hundred people. And that building now houses all 3 corporations that are related to our Supreme Council. So the fraternal portion of the which is our Supreme Council, the Children's Dyslexia Centers Corporation, as well as the Museum and Library Corporation. All 3 corporations are now housed under that one roof. Back in 2012, 2011, the decision was made that we sell the property that was originally purchased for the Supreme Council headquarters and relocate. So we took 2 of the exhibition halls in the museum and library, much to the dismay of the staff. But it has worked out to be a substantial benefit, I think, for all of the corporations. We're now under one roof. We've saved considerable finances by doing so. Part of my responsibilities is working with all the departments for the museum and library to create budgets for everything that we do there, as well as oversee the facility itself. It's a first-class facility. We've kept it, even though it's a 48-year-old building, we've kept that building in great condition. And it's something that every Mason can be very proud of. We are now neighbors to the town of Lexington. They bought the building that we sold, and that's a community center, and we have a great relationship with the town of Lexington. We're working now on becoming a part of an established cultural district, which they're creating in the town of Lexington. So we certainly hope that anybody that's in the area can come and visit for all of those reasons, in addition to the museum and library, all of the things that we do with the exhibitions and our collection. And for those people that are visiting, if you're in a small group, or if we know that you're coming as an individual and we have a little bit of notice ahead of time, we can make some special accommodations and perhaps show you some of the things that may not be out on display at that point in time. So we invite people to stop by. We're open 5 days a week. And one Saturday, and now that we're past COVID, we decided we would get back to Saturdays as well. So we're open one Saturday a month, and all of those dates are on our website for people to check out.
That's fantastic. So I'd like to kind of pick your guys' brain a little bit from a professional standpoint on libraries and museum and archive, because we have a lot of people watching the show that have items within their lodge, Masonic records within their lodge that some don't know what to do with, others don't want any part of it. So to kind of get your guys' opinion here, what is the best way for a lodge to take on their collections? Is it best to get them to someone like you, or is there ways that they can preserve and archive that stuff themselves?
I guess the first question I think a lodge should ask itself is, why are they keeping the material? Which is, I don't say, that sounds more sarcastic than I mean it to sound. It's a good question to ask, because sometimes you might have a bunch of old books that you never look at. And
Right.
The question is, why do we have these books, and what do we hope to do with them? So that some questions are straightforward and easy. You have your lodge's records. You say, why do we have these materials? Well, it's the history of our lodge. We'd like to keep them. It's obviously a vital part of telling the story of where we've been and where we're going. So I think it depends how much stuff you have, but I feel like that's the first question, is to really look at everything and say, why do we have this material? Is there anything here that we don't want to keep? And if so, where do we want to try to find a home for it? Now, like I said, if you're looking at your actual records, your ledgers, your minute books, and so forth, you're going to want to keep that material, presumably. I think the next thing you can do, well, I will say, as a sort of aside here, a plug, the museum and library did put together a booklet called Caring for Your Masonic Treasures, which is available as a PDF booklet on the museum's website. And it answers a lot of these questions, mostly focusing on paper material. But because we get these questions all the time, right? We get so many lodges, understandably, they're in old buildings. They don't have people who are working with them who have a background in dealing with documents. And so we get questions all the time of, what am I supposed to do with this material? How do I take care of it? I want to do the right thing. And so the museum staff decided, well, as a start, we could put together this very basic booklet that answers some of these questions in terms of, where should I store material? How should I store material? And so, things, and it helps you ask certain questions that you may not know to ask. Like, for example, where am I storing this material in the building? Is there a better place I can store it? So you might realize, we're storing this, under some pipes next to the radiator. We could move this material from a place where there could be a potential incident that would ruin these materials, make them not viable for the future, and put them in a better place within just the building we have. And then there's other things, depending on what kind of resources you have, there's other things you might be able to do, such as put them in certain kinds of archival boxes, which will help protect them as well. Again, looking at the conditions of the temperature and the humidity in the rooms of the lodge that you have, that there's likely to be some rooms that are better than others for storing the material. And we're always happy to get specific questions. So if people have questions, we're happy we encourage people to get in touch with us and say, here's the situation I'm dealing with. Could you give me a little bit of advice? I also always tell people that if they are lucky enough to be near and have some sort of relationship with people who work in library and archives who may not be Masons, reach out to those people and talk to them, because a lot of them are enthusiastic about caring for all kinds of materials. And so they also locally might be able to partner with you and help you out as well, because they're interested in preserving all kinds of heritage materials, including Masonic material. So I would say starting with the Caring for Your Masonic Treasures booklet is a great place to start, because it also contains some links out to some further resources where you can get more in-depth good information about how to store particular kinds of documents and books. And I don't know if you want to add anything to that, Hilary.
I think that was a good summary. I lodges do have a wonderful historic material, and I think ultimately, as Jeff was saying, if the best thing that or one of the best things a lodge can do is really identify the things that they want to keep, they want to preserve, that are core to their identity, and focus their resources on understanding and preserving those, and that will help them perhaps let go of some other things that maybe are not as germane to the telling their story, or that will help them focus their resources. It also helps if you get a few enthusiasts in a lodge that really take on take on this as their sort of part of their work at the lodge. Because when I go out to lodges, I feel like I'm often meeting the person who said, "This is a great history. I'm going to work hard to preserve it and disseminate it." And it makes people feel special about the organization that they're part of.
That's fantastic insight. So one thing I'm sitting here thinking about, because when I go to some lodges that do have a neat collection, it's typically always the same collection, always sitting there, always out. But in a more professional stance, going to a museum, like we were talking, you guys have certain displays at certain times that are rotated out. And is there benefit to rotating that out beyond just trying to show everything you have?
You mean a benefit from the objects?
As far as like preserving them, is there a benefit not to leaving the items out all the time versus just swapping out displays to show different objects?
Well, luckily you can do both. So you can tell a new story and also change the objects you're using to, tell a story, and it is of benefit to the object. An example is Masonic aprons. In New England, you often find in many lodges examples of framed silk, or often printed on silk aprons from the 18-teens, 1820s that have been framed in the same spot for many years. That is not, it's great because people love looking at them. It's not great for the preservation of the object. So if an organization has a chance to switch things around, perhaps swap out the apron with an image of the apron, sometimes that will help contribute to the long-term preservation of that kind of an object. Typically paper, textiles, some kinds of photographs, if they're printed on paper, those are the kinds of things that are vulnerable to being exposed to light for a long time. But it's a little bit like what Jeff was saying. The biggest investment any lodge can make in the preservation of their historic material and even their building is climate control. And
that's a fantastic point.
That sometimes is a big, it's hard in historic buildings.
So you're sparking a little bit of curiosity in my brain here, talking about framed aprons, because you might be able to see right there, which it blends in, but that's actually my great-great-grandfather's Master Mason apron, and I was actually installed as Master of my lodge wearing that apron because I didn't know it existed until a random holiday when it was handed on to me, but I put it in that frame, and now you've got me wondering, what is the best way to preserve an apron?
In a sort of a sweeping statement, every apron's a little bit different. Keep it flat. Don't handle it much. Keep it away from heat and water. And most of all, keep it away from light.
From light. Fantastic.
Yeah. And you usually want to store those kinds of things flat rather than vertically, like your framed one.
Interesting. Very well. So, a lot of times when Masons are given their Master Mason apron, and I think it's just the convenience of the case it comes in, but we see these, cylinder tubes that they come in, and you always, put those up, and I always tell people, don't do that, because for one, those, I guess the leather type material likes to hold that position, and then whenever you need it, it just wants to curl up. But obviously, it's better to have it flat. So in a historical standpoint of trying to preserve that, would those cylinders really do more damage than good in long-term situation?
Well, I don't want to speak poorly for the cylinders, but yes, they do not contribute to the long-term preservation of the aprons. And almost depending, regardless of what kind of material the apron's made out of, be it leather, be it some kind of textile. It's also, if you think about if anything's stored in a coral shape like that, if it has paint on it, like old aprons from the early 1800s that have a painted surface, the paint and the leather or textile that it was put on are not going to age in the same way and behave in the same way in different environments. So if you curl them up like that, they're going to be at war with each other. So I would say keep it flat, but I understand, these things are not always practical. And here in New England, I see a lot of people that carry their apron in sort of a briefcase style apron.
Right.
And those, you can do worse with than those. Those work pretty well for aprons because you can store things flat. But the thing to look at is the materials that are used on the inside to make sure that they're inert.
Fantastic. We're getting a couple comments over on the Facebook side. We got Ryan Flynn, who's a Masonic artist up in the Northeast there, and he's saying, so in other words, not on your wall, you're letting your great-great-grandpappy down, Alex. I guess I'm going to have to find another place to store that apron. And then we got Brother Kenneth Beeler on here saying, I've never actually looked at the books in our lodge. I'm going to have to take some time to do so. So that's fantastic. We are sparking the interest to actually dive into lodge records here and see what we have and how we can best preserve that. So that's fantastic. All right, so I'd like to hear some more about the Scottish Rite Museum and Library and what maybe your plans are moving into the future.
So I'll start on that. So we have Hilary mentioned our Hall of Fame exhibition, which is in place right now. It's the second year of what was planned to be 3 years, which is actually 4, because we've inducted 10 famous Masons the first year. We just inducted 5 more this past October, November, and we'll be inducting 5 more famous Masons in this coming October. And so that will become essentially a 4-year exhibition. And we're working now on how we can establish essentially preserving that exhibition so that it can be a continuing exhibition without probably being a physical exhibition. We don't want to limit the things that we have the opportunity to share by continuing that exhibition as a physical exhibition. So we'll be working with some of the Supreme Council staff that do some of the video work for our museum and library to figure out how we can best preserve this exhibition and continue to share it as we go down the road. We're working, as I mentioned earlier, on putting some events together to celebrate the 50th anniversary of our institution and the 250th anniversary of the beginning of the American Revolution in the town of Lexington, Massachusetts. We're always looking for new pieces to consider for both the archives and the collection. Some of these are gifted, and we do have a limited budget that the staff has at the use for their consideration to purchase items that they may find out in the open market, and it would be great if we had more funds to try to preserve and save some of these things as they come along. Unfortunately, we don't have all the money in the world to be able to buy those things and protect and preserve them. And we hope that the things that we're not able to protect and preserve, somebody else is stepping up and doing the right thing for those items. Hilary and Jeff are working diligently with their collections to try to essentially accumulate data and put it in a format and fashion that we can better share all of this information, whether it's photos or digital data, scans of documents, all of those things. We're working on a long-term plan to be able to get more of those items out to people that can't physically come and visit our institution. So, and I'll let both Hilary and Jeff share a little bit more about the processes that they're using right now as we work towards those endeavors.
Yeah, that would be fantastic.
Sure. Well, Jeff, do you mind if I go?
Go right ahead.
All right. So we try to, Alex, you mentioned, for example, that you don't live in New England, so you're not able to come to the museum as frequently as you might like. And you are not alone. But we do have a lot of digital resources. We have a database, an online, on our website, a searchable database of several thousand objects from the museum's object collection. And that allows people to kind of dip in, sort of see the sorts of things that we have, and find out if they would like to come to the museum, or if the museum could possibly help them with a research question. We also have a blog that we've been working on for since the dawn of time, really, which was 2008?
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's another way that people find us. They don't come physically, but they find us on the blog, because we've been writing small and sort of basically interpretive articles about different items in the museum and library collection over time. And people will find us. They'll come with questions, and we get a surprising number of inquiries through those different ways. So for us on the museum side, the biggest, one of the investments we make in staff time is to try to photograph and catalog material when it comes into the museum as well and as expeditiously as we can, and then get it out there on our website so people can, start to see what we have. And that's one of the ways that we reach people that we're not able to see in person. But then Jeff, on the library side, they do it a whole different way. So Jeff, maybe you want to talk about that.
Sure. So, on the library and archive side, we have a digital collections website for the library and archives, which currently consists of almost 1,000 objects that we've digitized and cataloged. And mostly all of the material on that site is from our archives collection, because we made a decision. We started doing this around 2015, I believe. And although we have lots of resources, we still, when you start looking at a digitization project, we had to work within our means in terms of what resources we had, mostly meaning staff, because it's a labor-intensive thing to do. Because scanning material is step one. Having digital images is fantastic, but if you want people to be able to find them, then you need to create some metadata, some cataloging, so that people can find what this material is. And that is the less exciting, labor-intensive part of things, but very important in terms of trying to provide access to the material. So because we were looking to get the most bang for our buck, we sort of focused on archives materials because they're unique, as opposed to library materials, which are published materials usually published in the hundreds or thousands, whereas most archival material, even things like Masonic diplomas, certificates, if they're printed, they're still unique because they're filled out to an individual. And so we decided, well, let's try to focus our endeavors on unique material, and also material that, like Masonic certificates, which is a single object rather than digitizing a book of minutes. So rather than digitizing a book of minutes that's 100 pages long, we could digitize X number of Masonic certificates. The Masonic certificates also have a lot of visual interest, I think, as well. So they're very interesting to look at online. So we have a few hundred Masonic certificates that we've digitized, and then we have lots of other different kinds of material related to the American Civil War and Freemasonry, women in Freemasonry, a number of different sort of subject areas where it's not a very in-depth look at our collections, but it gives you a sense of some of the things that are in our collections, and provides some access to them. And so what we don't have, and what we're going to be working on in the future, since you were talking about future plans, is on the archive side, we don't have very good access to information about the collections that we can share with the public. So, for example, on the library side, we have a library catalog. So if you go to the museum's website, you go to the library catalog, you can search to find out if we have a book. And the library catalog will say, yes, you have this book. And so about over 90% of I would say close to 100% now of the library's collection has been cataloged and is in the catalog. So we pretty much know if you don't find it in the catalog, we're pretty certain that we don't have that particular book. What we haven't done over the years is provide as much access to the archives collections. And so this year, we're really going to try to focus our efforts more on that. We're looking at using a software called Archive Space, which was developed by archivists to provide access to archives collections. It's something that a lot of archives use. And so this will essentially be like a catalog for the archives collection. So it won't be it will link to some digitized material, but you have to think of it a little bit more like a library catalog, that it tells you more about what material we have. So it'll tell you, yes, we have the minute books of a particular fraternal organization, and this is how many of them we have, and these are the years that they cover. And then if someone's interested in looking at them, then they're able to do that because they know it exists. Because the problem with collections that are not cataloged is they're hidden. No one knows that they exist unless you provide information about them, because that's the only way you're gonna find them. So we're looking to do that in the coming years in order to provide a lot more access to the archives collection than we've been able to do in the past.
That's fantastic. So we're about 9 minutes to the top of the hour. I want to give you guys a chance to go around with some final comments of anything that you want to get out for the public to know about your facility and operations. Hilary, if we can start with you.
Well, thanks for the opportunity. We love people to, first of all, know that we're here and that it's a resource. If you're interested in Masonic history, please, explore. If you have questions, please get in touch. Sometimes I dazzle people because they call and I pick up the phone, and they're always expecting to leave a message. But if you can catch us, we're happy to help you on the phone, by email. We also, and I think Alex, that you first got in touch with us over our Facebook.
Yes, definitely.
Page. So we have Facebook, Instagram, the blog that I mentioned, lots of ways to connect. And I'm always interested in hearing about what people's passions are related to Masonic history, be it something that they just found in their family history, or a research project that they're working on, for a paper that they're giving to a lodge, anything like that. So we're I guess what I'm saying is we'd love to hear from people if they, have questions and would like to engage with us.
Fantastic. Rich, how about you?
So I'd like to share a couple of other things that we're doing
definitely
at the museum and library. So we do have a researcher that does some research work and also does some transcribing and right now. So his name is Kamel Usayev, and Kamel's working on kind of an interesting project right now. There's some Swiss manuscripts that are actually written in French, the period of about 1875, and that is a series of the 33 Scottish Rite degrees from that period in time. So Kamel's actually translating these documents and then writing a commentary about these 33 Scottish Rite degrees from the period of 1875 that are written in French, found in Swiss documents. So that will be Kamel's next book. I think it's going to be very, very interesting. And we're doing this so that we can take a look at where the 33 degrees have come from over the course of time. How have they changed? What was possibly significant in these degrees then that may not be so significant today. So I think it's going to be a pretty interesting piece for people to take a look at when Kamel is finished with that. Just to talk a little bit more about the work at the museum and library, all of these things take time and resources and finances, the things that Jeff and Hilary just talked about with the collections. And we want to do all that we can to bring them to the public in a better fashion. And the staff, with the resources that they currently have, does an absolutely terrific job with this. We would love to have additional people and additional finances to be able to do this in a quicker fashion and certainly a more favorable fashion so that people can use these assets. But unfortunately, we're limited, as any business is. And I commend the staff on all of the work that they do that has gotten us to the point where we are today, and their plans for the future to continue to bring all of these assets more to the forefront for the public and our brothers not only across the country, but across the world. So those are a couple of things that I did want to mention, Alex, and I certainly appreciate the opportunity to share those extra things here tonight as well.
Oh, pleasure's all mine. Having you guys on has been absolutely amazing. Jeff, any final comments from you?
Sure. I just want to build on what Hilary was saying in terms of getting in touch with us. I feel like sometimes people are a little shy about getting in touch. They're worried about bothering people. Before I was a librarian, I was always worried about bothering the librarian. And now that I've been a librarian for over 25 years, I can guarantee you that librarians love to have you get in touch. So I would definitely encourage people, if they have questions, if they have any interest, to get in touch with us, to call us, to get in touch with us through Facebook, to email us, because we are always happy to try to help people with any question they have, no matter how small, how confusing it might be. You have not met people more enthusiastic about Freemasonry that are not Freemasons than the people that work at the Scottish Rite Masonic Museum and Library. We will talk your ear off and listen to you talk about Freemasonry and the history of Freemasonry, because it's a passion we have, and we do it 40 hours a week, and it's we love hearing from people. And like Hilary said, we like to hear about people's research interests. So get in touch if you have a question, and don't be shy about it. We'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, definitely. So after this, be sure you guys send me an email. I want to make sure that we have all the contact info, and we will make sure to get that in the show notes on all the different platforms, including the audio podcast side, because that's really one heck of an offer, guys, because we see all the time on social media and stuff, everyone's asking these questions, and a lot of us, like myself, maybe take little archival courses here and there, and we figure it out. But here you've got professionals, not even just in the Mason world, but actually professionals in the industry, offering their advice to you and an open ear. So that's quite the offer, and I hope people will definitely get in contact, take you up on that offer, and make it out to see this in person. I know I'm going to. It's definitely on my list. So with that, guys, we are about at the top of the hour, and we typically end our episodes with a toast. If you wouldn't mind to offer up a toast for this evening.
So I'd be happy to do that, Alex. And I'm going to do so with my glass from Masonicon that I attended earlier this year in Manchester, New Hampshire with Ryan Flynn.
Fantastic.
With a little bit of single malt scotch. And I'd like to share a few words. A little bit of this comes from our new mission statement that we just revisited at the museum and library. So with that said, I would like to propose a toast tonight, which shares much of the mission from the Scottish Rite Masonic Museum and Library. Let's take this opportunity together to celebrate all groups and institutions whose mission is to engage and inspire both the general public and members of our Masonic fraternity by fostering the knowledge and appreciation of America's past, Freemasonry, and fraternalism. May we all continue to support the mission of Freemasonry and the significant role it offers in celebrating patriotism, fraternalism, and inclusion, as well as personal and civic virtues. Cheers.
Hear, hear. Cheers.
Cheers.
Jeff, I don't know how anyone is going to follow up that toast on future episodes. You may have ruined the show. Congratulations.
Good work, Rick.
No, I want to thank you guys so much for coming on this evening. And more just for your passion and what you do for Freemasonry, especially with Hilary and Jeff, you guys not having that direct Masonic connection. I know this is a passion in your career, and to have you guys as that professional asset, preserve the history of Freemasonry, both in the physical stance and the research stance and everything that offers, really does such a huge favor to all of us, because as guys like me know, and so many watching the show, so much of our history is just disappearing before our eyes. So to have professionals like you that care to this degree in your positions really means the world, and it's really one of the best things we can have. So thank you guys so much for all that you do.
Well, thank you. Thank you for your enthusiasm and your interest.
Most definitely. Well, thank you guys so much for coming on. Everyone that joined in live this evening over on the Facebook side, the YouTube side, thank you guys so much. And until next time, keep preserving the history of Freemasonry. We'll see you back in 2 weeks. Have a great evening.